Why Indians must work hard. No nation in economic transition has workers achieving life work-life balance. The kerfuffles, poor working Saturdays or 90-hour weeks are but outpourings of an elite minority. National outrage about business leaders most notably Infosys founder Narayan Murthy, L&T CEO SN Subramaniam exhorting Indians to put in long working hours, widespread concerns over gig labor, especially their work conditions and compensation, and RBI maintaining tight monetary policy and hardening norms over personal credit in the face of economic slowdown. Their seeming their seemingly disparate trends, independently unexceptionable at first principles yet intertwined by a basic dichotomy, sensibilities of India's elite coming up against realities of India's status as low middle income country, struggling to grow at a place most Asian peers did several decades ago. Work-life balance, high levels of workers' rights, and high macroeconomic stability are all desirable outcomes, but nearly all societies and nations fell far short of those standards during economic transitions. While recent experience of fast economic changes is largely in Asia, the same expectations have been the rule even in West during industrial revolution of 18th and 19th century. Long work hours have been an Asian norm. China has 996 working hour system. Employees work from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week, 72 hours a week. In Japan, 2016 government survey showed nearly a quarter of companies required employees to put in more than 80 hours of overtime a month. An average Japanese worker didn't avail 10 of her paid vacation days. It's a trend normal across East Asia, especially after World War II when region embarked on its spectacular growth trajectory. Results have been phenomenal. In about 4 decades, the region became the world's largest economic engine after US, with several countries graduating to rich status. Per capita income in higher than $13,000 and other close to that level. Similarly, labor wage repression owes its origin to Europe's Industrial Revolution. Smokestacks across great European cities were operated by workers to appalling conditions who were paid a small part of enormous economic value added by the enterprise. Charles Dickens captured the angst in Hard Times. Any capitalist who made a £60,000 out of sixpence always professed to wonder why 60,000 nearest hands didn't each make £60,000 out of a sixpence. This was despite Europe's access to capital seized from its colonies. Circumstances remains dour even a century on as the Industrial Revolution made its way on the other side of the Atlantic. Charlie Chaplin, as the iconic Little Tramp in modern times, depicted the dehumanizing effects of modern industry. Cut to the 20th century, and the trend remained the same in substance, this time in Asia. Through the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, real wages in East Asia barely went up, even as economies grew at tiger rates. State policy and sometimes direct intervention kept labor wages low. The trend reversed only in the 21st century when most countries have reached substantial levels of prosperity. India's financial services architecture reveals a similar reach for the first world levels, monetary policy framework around inflation targeting, curbs on fiscal excesses via FRBM, ultra-conservative banking regulation, regulatory approach aims for macro stability and risk aversion, with growing with growth sought to be enabled as an outcome of the former rather than an independent objective by itself. Regulatory conservatism has percolated deep into private corporate behavior. India Inc. is generally conspicuous in its frugal approach towards capital, focus on return on capital employed, and risk optimization. In contrast, post World War II, East Asia saw high investment model of growth, invariably getting into boom bust cycles and generally inferior to India ROCE profiles. Final outcomes: while macro growth at low base years was very high, return from the markets of financial investors were decidedly poor. China is a great case in point. Its stock market made very little for investors, even as its economy showed the most breathtaking long-term growth ever seen. In short, India is caught between an instinct to preserve work-life balance, extensive labor protection, and risk-free approach to preserving macro stability. All of these in some way hold back a drive towards maximizing growth. In a democracy, popular demands drive certain policy choices. Expensive welfare programs, for instance, are clearly electorally seductive. None of these trends noted here are matters of mass conversation. On the contrary, they represent elite sensibility that's sometimes reflected in policy making. Choices made as a society and polity aren't necessarily via contest of political choice, but sometimes via contest of political correctness. Economist John Robinson's "Everything about India and its opposite are true" is an enduring cliche. In some ways, politically correct opposite is the binding constraint on the everything of pulling Indians up to a ladder quicker. How to attract world's top manufacturers. While what will it take to make India a developed nation by 2047? We must not only sustain but accelerate our economic growth. Growing at 8% in real terms will just about get us to a 20 trillion economy by 2047 or per capita income of $12,000, comparable to where China is today. Clearly, sustained and rapid growth of over 8% is essential to lift millions of Indians out of poverty and create a 200 million plus high quality jobs India needs. Laser sharp focus on exports is key to achieving sustained and required rates of growth. The past 70 years, economics have been able to consistently raise the living standards. Living standards of the for their population by targeting high growth via exports. Taiwan, Japan, South Korea, China, and now Vietnam have all grown rapidly by taking advantage of their labor force to make goods for the world market. India's own growth story has been export led, but as yet just in service and capital intensive sectors. Winning in exports requires a country to be more competitive than any other. It is very difficult for any country to be globally competitive in every category. Hence, India must focus on its biggest strength, abundant low-cost workforce. It has to take advantage of its large working age population, the demographic dividend to unlock exports in employment-intensive sectors. Government of India has shown intent on promising manufacturing for exports through schemes like PLI. Some green shoots of success are visible with expansion of mobile phone exports from India. We must double down the expanding this success in electronics assembly to similar employment intensive sectors like apparel, footwear, furniture, toys and hands tools to boost the growth trajectory. These sectors collectively account for almost $1 trillion of global trade and have the potential of creating over half of the 200 million jobs we need, many of which will go to women. Issues holding up growth of Indian exports are complex, and piecemeal reforms won't suffice in tackling them. They require a coordinated approach across states and central governments operating in mission mode to help India to get its competitive hurdles. Cornerstones of this strategy should be removing tax and tariff structure distortions, creating world-class manufacturing clusters and attracting lead brands and anchor tenants. While this strategy is being put in place, the near-term competitiveness gap can be bridged through an incentive package targeted at employment intensive sectors. High input cost is the biggest constraint for most labor-intensive sectors in the export market. This is largely due to high and at times inverted duty structure on critical inputs like metals, fibers, rubber, which raises the price in the domestic market. Non-tariff barriers like quality control orders further disrupt global supply chains by restricting access to critical inputs for manufacturers in India. For intensive for labor-intensive manufacturing to flourish, it is important to align duties on inputs which those in competitive competing countries and provide easy access to raw materials at globally competitive prices. Government will separately need to work with manufacturers of commodities to ensure they can compete in a low duty environment. India has created thousands of industrial clusters over the year, but most of them are subscale and provide no extra advantage to manufacturers. Government of India should incentivize state governments to create large-scale manufacturing clusters for labor-intensive sectors where a highly attractive investment climate is created through plug-and-play infrastructure, provision for worker housing, simplified approval process, and relaxations around various laws and compliances. This requires legislation that develops authority for making rules and granting approvals to a local level on the lines of Shenzhen in China and now Gift City in India. Ideally, devolution of authority should extend to the most state level rules and a few critical central rules. What India's experience with Apple or Vietnam's with Samsung demonstrates that large global firms are required to be engines of exports. Through Foxconn, Apple already has India's single largest factory with over 45,000 employees under one roof. Similarly, Samsung employs over 110,000 people in Vietnam, accounts for exports over $65 billion. Because global brands and their contract manufacturers across electronics, apparel, footwear, and toys bring the technology and scale to be globally competitive, India needs to lay out the red carpet for them. These firms need an ecosystem of suppliers that can largely be local SMEs who will benefit from large assured orders as well as mentoring by global players. To succeed, given the intense competition among countries to attract global value chains, India needs an all-in strategy with tailored packages for India to be the choice for as the next manufacturing destination. Finally, an interim support package will bridge the competitiveness gap before the ecosystem in India scales to the required level. Ideally, this should be in the forms of an employment linked incentive target targeted at labor intensive sectors to spur large scale job creation, poised to be an economic growth nucleus over the next 25 to 30 years. India needs to focus on potential high growth sectors for exports and job growth, where it must leverage its unique advantages. In a setback for the armed forces' ongoing plans for the introduction of military drones, a medium altitude long endurance drone called Drishti 1 and Drishti 10, assembled in India by Adani Defense and Air Force Aerospace under license from Israel, crashed in the pre-accepted acceptance trial. Both Army and Navy had ordered the SATCOM-enabled drone, which cost around 120 crore, but such setbacks are not out of the ordinary. The armed forces need at least 150 new Malay drones medium altitude long endurance. Medium altitude long endurance. Aside from the high altitude long endurance drones like American Predators, New Delhi has already linked 32,000 crore contract for 31 of these. There's no denying that drones have assumed military salience in the last few years, especially after their effective deployment in Azerbaijan-Armenia conflict and Ukraine war. The latter in particular has taken drone warfare to a whole new level. In 2024, domestically produced Ukrainian drones accounted for 96% of all UAVs used by Ukrainian troops. This included over 1.5 million FPV drones that are no more than 7 inches in size. The point is innovation is the name of the game in drone warfare. Hence, what is needed in India is to create a robust drone manufacturing ecosystem comprising both private and public players. Towards the end, Government of India has done well to include all categories of drone bearing strategic ones in the negative list of imports, but that's step one. Given the investment in R&D is vital here, Government of India's policy of selecting the lowest bidder needs to be reviewed, for private players can best innovate when they have more financial elbow room, which in turn can bring down prices. Each Ukrainian FPV drone costs around $500 or less. Third, as the induction of an array of drones into the armed forces picks up pace, there is a need to create a specialist corps to operate the drones or specialist drone subunits. This will not only streamline integration and operation of drones, but will also see drone warfare emerge as the key pillar of defense strategy. The bottom line, no matter the setbacks, Government of India and armed forces must keep investing in drone supply chains, R&D and D, and procurement. 21st century warfare demands this. Vogue chairmen like Anand Mahindra have asked L&T counterpart to smell the copy. They are the latest and weightiest to join the bandwagon against SN Subramaniam, no longer private video. In its L&T chairman seeing no use for TLC in workplace hinted 70-hour week. This would subpoena Sundays and next non-productive pursuits such as staring at your wife. Mumbai's Trans Harbour Atal Setu. I would like to use L&T's most wanted projects to show how its boss can engineer a workplace as happy as profitable. Don't be intransigent a harbor grudge against Cyberatic Sunday. Instead, bridge the gap between corporate objectives and personal goals. Delhi and Mumbai terminals, extending my analogy to airports, L&T needs internal systems as sophisticated and sensitive as those in aeronautical arsenal. Bullet train, you may want growth at suprasonic speed, but manpower acquisition can be as fractious as the current land acquisition. Undersea trials for Mumbai Coastal Road. Tallest companies are built as much on diversity, even more crucial is calibrating balance, structural, chemical, work life. Now even cricket's LBW is leave behind vibes. Putting the accountability in AI. The emergence and development of AI in healthcare signifies one of the biggest shifts in modern medicine. From early diagnostics to dissection to personalized treatment plans, AI is pushing the limits of healthcare and opening up new possibilities which look promising. With the quote of an oft used line, with great powers comes great responsibility to make sure the innovation does not outpace accountability, especially in a field with such high stakes as healthcare, where lives hang in balance. The premise The promise of transparency, ethics, and trust must anchor every step of the journey. Transparency, pillar of trust, AI as a partner and not replacement. So, traceable AI systems ensure that every choice made is explainable, reproducible, and open to scrutiny. This isn't about adhering to regulations like EU's AI Act or FDA guidelines for AI machine learning in medical devices. It's about building trust in technology that is crucial for human health. Without transparency, AI risks turning into a black box, which in healthcare is not a technological challenge but also a moral imperative. AI lacks intuition, contextual understanding, and the ability to empathize, qualities that are fundamental in healthcare decision making. This According to EY's 24 survey, while 96% of healthcare executives acknowledge AI's potential to improve efficiency, 83% express reservations about its role in tasks like personalizing medical plans or resisting diagnosis. Moreover, 91% stress the importance of human oversight to ensure ethical and effective outcomes. This underscores the necessity of integrating human supervision at every stage of AI decision making. AI excels at analyzing vast data sets and identifying patterns that are imperceptible to the human eye. However, it must remain a tool and not just become an autonomous decision maker. The healthcare systems of the future will derive their strength from collaboration, where AI enhances human experience without replacing compassion and ethical judgment that only humans can provide. Compliance with global privacy standards like US Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, European Union's General Data Protection Regulation, or India's proposed Digital, Da- Digital Private Data Protection Act provide a foundation ensuring AI systems adhere to strict guidelines for safeguarding sensitive information. It requires proactive measures such as advanced encryption, strict anonymization protocols, and governance systems that guarantee patient data is safe and used only to enhance AI driven care. The H-1B visa serves US interest and India as well. Donald Trump's narrow victory in the US presidential election was built on a blatant anti-immigrant agenda. The main targets of the withdrawal were Latin American immigrants from Mexico and countries further south. The secondary targets were immigrants from other global south countries, those Trump has branded shithole nations in the first term while lamenting a lack of Norwegian immigrants. This is a part of a larger white nationalist agenda that includes efforts to rewrite the history and effects of slavery and roll back policies in favor of diversity, equity, and inclusion. The incoming administration is making noises about withdrawing the automatic citizenship right to anyone born in America and is engaged in a high decibel argument about what to do about the immigration of skilled workers. In this crossfire, Indian immigrants are by far the most affected group. The instrument used to bring high skilled workers into the US is the H-1B visa, which allows highly educated foreign professionals to work in fields such as science, mathematics, engineering, technology, and medicine. The primary beneficiaries of this visa policy are Indians. In the early to mid 2000s, Indians comprised roughly half of the H-1B visa recipients. In 2023, they made up about 72% of nearly 4,000 H-1B visa holders. About two-thirds of all H-1 visas are computer science professions. It has mockingly been called the outsourcing visa. Hundreds of thousands of one-time H-1B visa holders from India have gone to acquire US permanent residency and citizenship. In a 2016 book, The Other 1% Indians in America, Devesh Kapoor, Nirvikar Singh, and I had documented H-1B visa's role in turning Indian immigration to the US from trickle to torrent. Starting in 1995, Indian immigrants thus grew to 1% of US population and became a visible minority in some parts of the country. Not only that, because these new arrivals were skilled and well paid, Indians became the highest educated and highest earning group, immigrant or native, in the US. The rise of the IT industry also transformed India, its GDP, exports, labor force, higher education system through the mushrooming of private engineering colleges and urbanization witnessed the growth of cities like Bengaluru to Cuttack. Despite stupendous growth of IT and IT affiliated industries in the US, there is unease about foreign workers. Critics argue that immigrant IT workers take jobs away from Americans and that by working for low wages they undercut wages for the whole industry. This argument, voiced with far more inflammatory rhetoric, is increasingly heard from the white nationalist MAGA wing of the Republican Party. That is to be expected, but even liberal icons like Bernie Sanders, whom many feel should have been the Democratic presidential candidate in 2016, make the same argument. In Fox News op-ed this week, he wrote, "The primary purpose of H-1B and other guest worker programs is not to employ the best and the brightest, but instead to replace American workers with low-paid workers from abroad who often live as indentured servants." On the other hand, inside the Republican camp are billionaires like Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, an immigrant and a child of immigrants respectively, who argue that US simply does not produce enough skilled workers to meet the demand of high-tech and innovation-driven economy. Tesla, one of Musk's firms, employs about 1,700 H-1B visa holders. Amazon, top of the list, employs 13,000. Some conservative H-1B visa supporters locate the source of this mismatch between demand and supply in American culture. According to Ramaswamy, a culture that celebrates the prom queen over the math Olympiad champ or a jock over the valedictorian will not produce the best engineers. What is the truth? Do H-1B visas workers really work for low wages, or do they really take the job away from Americans? The evidence strongly suggests that the answer to both questions is no. On wages in 2023, the average H-1B visa holder earned about $118,000, which is slightly more than the average US income in computer and mathematical jobs and almost twice as the US median household income. It is obvious that Indians in America would not have become the highest earning group if weren't well paid. The allegation of taking jobs away is also untenable. The IT sector has grown massively in the last 3 decades. Millions of new jobs have been created in the IT. From beginning of this explosive growth, there was shortage of appropriate skilled worker in the US. One could have expected a vast higher education system in the US to eventually produce enough skilled labor to match demand, but this that hasn't happened. Why it hasn't happened is an interesting question that requires serious analysis more than feasible in this space. But we know so large is the shortage that by the mid 2010s, people born in India made up well over 10% of American labor force in fields like computer science and engineering, electrical engineering, and technology. It is possible that if an IT labor had not been imported through the H-1B visa, The education system in the US would at some point have been forced to produce enough skilled workers. But in such a scenario, Google, Facebook, Amazon, and Tesla may not have been born at all, or not grown to what they have become, or may not have born outside the US. These alternative histories are fun to ponder, but best left in the realm of fiction. There is much to respect in the passion of Bernie Sanders on the ideological left, and much to worry about the racism that drives the MAGA decriers of the H1B program, who would surely not have minded had H1B workers been Norwegian. But these strange bedfellows are both wrong. The US IT industry simply would not have become the behemoth it is without its foot soldiers, mostly Indian, imported through the H1B program. We must celebrate the warships joining our naval fleet. The three new warships commissioned into the Indian Navy on January 15 have all been built at Musgao Dock Shipbuilders. India's premier warship, INS Surat, is the fourth and final Vishakhapatnam class destroyer built under Project 15B. INS Nilgiri is the lead ship of the Project 17A, a class of seven multi-role frigates, and INS Berkshire is the sixth and final Scorpion class built under Project 75. The first two were designed at the Navy's Directorate of Naval Design, but all three testify to India's growing reliance in the critical domains of warship and submarine production. In 1964, Emergency Committee of the Cabinet laid down target of 140 warship navy. The more recent Maritime Capability Perspective plan targets 160 ships. Recent Navy chiefs have talked of a 200 ship force architecture, but have signaled that 175 warships would be more realistic. Without 140 functional warships today, India has some distance to go. INS Surat. This will be Navy's 13th destroyer in service, displacing 7,400 tons. It has sensors and weapons needed to tackle surface, air, and underwater threats. Four Ukrainian Zorya gas turbines propel it at the speed of 60 km per hour. After inducting five Kashin class destroyers from the Soviet Union in 1980s, Indian admirals were determined to design and build our own destroyers. The first indigenous destroyer were Delhi-class vessels INS Delhi, Mysore and Mumbai, built under Project 15 at the turn of the century. The Russian influence evident in Project 15 was replaced by more Indian design in the successor class Project 15A. Under this, three more destroyers were built at MDL, INS Kolkata, Kochi, and Chennai. Next came the four Project 15B destroyers Vishakhapatnam, Mormugao, Imphal, and Surat, built at combined cost of 35,000 crore. This will they are far more indigenized. INS Surat will be succeeded by eight next generation destroyer under Project 18, displacing 13,500 tons and propelled by integrated electric propulsion. These multi-muscular warships will be Navy's future backbone. Commodore Srikanth Kesnur, a naval historian, describes the role of destroyer. Thus, they can operate at the vanguard of the fleet with inbuilt flexibility in the manner of their deployment. They can be part of the carrier task force or operate independently or in small groups as the surface action groups or search and attack units. INS Nilgiri, India's warship building story, began in 1961 with 120-ton patrol vessel INS Ajay built by Garden Reach Shipbuilders engineers. A decade later, MDL was building a line of six 2,700-ton Leander class frigates with technology from the UK. The leadership of this class was INS Nilgiri, commissioned in 1972. Now, INS Nilgiri will be reborn as the lead ship of Project 17A, Built at the cost of 4,000 crore, INS Nilgiri features major advancements over the Shivalik class frigates that preceded it. Seven Nilgiri class vessels will be succeeded by Project 17B. Both Nilgiri and Surat will carry the newly inducted Sikorsky MH-60 Seahawk, a versatile and submarine helicopter. Berkshire is the sixth and last Calvary-class submarine MDL has built under Project 75. This is one of the most silent and versatile diesel-electric submarines in the world. It is designed from range of missions including anti-surface warfare and anti-submarine warfare, intelligence gathering, area surveillance, and special operations. Indian Navy submarines face an especially complex operating environment. Our coast is 7,500 km long, 5,600 km on the peninsula, 1,900 along island coast. The Arabian Sea's shallow draft renders it suitable only for small conventional submarines. Meanwhile, the Bay of Bengal's deep draft makes it ideal for large nuclear power submarine. The commissioning of INS Berkshire will enhance the number of Navy submarines to 17. These include 7 Russian origin Kilo class, 4 German origin HDW type 209 submarines, and 6 Scorpions. A year ago, India's Ministry of Defense announced that air independent propulsion developed by DRDO would be reversed integrated into a fleet of 6 Scorpions. AIP multiplies submarines operating endurance submerged. Conventional diesel electric submarines must surface to charge their batteries after about 48 hours of operation. In contrast, AIP-led submarines stay submerged for up to 14 days. According to the ministry's 30-year submarine building program, Project 75 will be followed by 75 1 or I, which involves building 6 AIP-propelled submarines in India with foreign AIP technology. However, with DRDO's AIP making headway, it could power our Project 75I boats. Alongside the construction of 24 conventional submarines, DRDO is developing 6 nuclear-propelled but conventionally armed attack submarines. Commissioning of INS Nilgiri, Surat, and Berkshire demonstrates India's progress in indigenous shipbuilding. These vessels have undergone rigorous trials on their machinery, hulls, firefighting equipment, plus damage control assessment. The vessel's navigation and communication systems at sea have been tested too, making them fully operational and ready for deployment.